The admissions clerk slid a bracelet toward me and said, "Your daughter marked you as unable to leave without family approval." Through the glass doors, I watched Rebecca's taillights vanish into the snow 3 days before Christmas. She had my phone and the folder I had refused to sign. Behind the clerk, the director opened my old file. His face changed, and he quietly locked the office door. "Mr. Hale," he said, "did you authorize your daughter to surrender control of your medical care, your accounts, and the house on Willow Creek Road?" "I did not." He showed me a scanned signature that looked almost like mine. Then he said the one sentence Rebecca had never expected anyone in that building to say: "We have been waiting 18 years to thank you. Now I think we may need to protect you. If your own child left you behind, would you call it fear, betrayal, or both? Tell me below. And subscribe to follow what that false signature uncovered 3 weeks earlier. I still believe my daughter was worried about me. I lived alone outside Cedar Falls, Iowa. In the house my wife, Margaret, and I had bought when Rebecca was 6. Every room carried a sound that was no longer there. Her sewing scissors rested in the same blue dish beside the upstairs window. I was 68 and slower than I had been, but I was not helpless. Arthritis had settled into my left knee, and the stairs made it complain in cold weather. I kept a cane near the back door for icy mornings. I still drove, cooked, paid my bills, and repaired small engines for neighbors in the workshop behind the garage. On Tuesdays, I delivered groceries to older residents who could not drive. On Thursdays, I volunteered at the county veterans transport desk. Though I had never worn a uniform myself, the challenge coins near my telephone came from veterans whose families I had helped while directing the county's emergency guardianship review office. For 26 years, I asked whether an older person truly lacked capacity or whether someone wanted control of a house or account. I retired when Margaret's cancer worsened. Rebecca knew what I had done, but she had been a teenager through much of it. To her, I had been the father who missed a school concert because a judge needed an emergency report, then came home smelling of courthouse coffee. I apologized often. I never explained the people who would have lost everything if I had left early. Rebecca was 39 now. She worked in real estate marketing in Des Moines and had always moved as if the next room contained an opportunity everyone else was too slow to notice. She and her husband, Grant Mercer, had been married for 12 years. Grant managed renovation projects, wore clean boots to dirty job sites, and could turn any conversation into a calculation. They had one son, my grandson Noah, who was 10 and still called me every Sunday to ask whether the creek had frozen. Rebecca began visiting more often after Thanksgiving. At first, I was grateful. She brought soup, replaced a hallway bulb I had been meaning to reach, and placed bright orange labels on containers in my refrigerator. "You shouldn't be climbing," she said when she saw the step stool. I wasn't planning to do it during an earthquake. She did not laugh. The next visit, she photographed the stairs, then the bathtub, then the pill organizer that held one prescription for blood pressure and another for arthritis. "What are the pictures for?" "Just documenting what we need to make safer." Grant arrived with a tape measure and walked through the downstairs rooms without taking off his coat. He measured the study, the dining room, and the space between the pantry and the back entrance. "A first-floor suite could work here," he said. "For whom?" Rebecca glanced at him. It was quick, but I noticed years in guardianship work had trained me to watch the glance before the answer. "For you, eventually," she said. "Or we could discuss a community with full support." I looked at the tape stretched across Margaret's dining room. "I do not need full support, Dad. This is not about what you need today." "Then what is it about?" Grant rolled the tape into its case. "Planning responsibly." That phrase returned when Rebecca asked for access to my banking, and Grant suggested adding his name to the workshop insurance. My attorney, not Grant. It was named as temporary financial agent if two independent physicians ever determined I could not manage my affairs. I had written the documents that way because I knew how easily love and money could become tangled. When I said no, Rebecca's mouth tightened. You trust a lawyer more than your own daughter. I trust clear boundaries more than anyone's good intentions, including mine. This is exactly what I mean, she said. Everything sounds like a hearing with you. The following Sunday, Noah called from Rebecca's phone. His voice was low. Grandpa, are you sick? I'm not. Why? Mom said you forget things now. Behind him, I heard Rebecca say his name. The call ended. I sat beside the telephone with one of the challenge coins pressed into my palm. It belonged to a retired medic named Paul Dorsey. Years earlier, Paul's nephew had tried to have him declared incompetent after Paul refused to sell the family farm. The nephew had described ordinary disagreements as confusion. He had photographed expired milk, a broken porch rail, and one missed doctor's appointment. Each fact was real. Together, arranged carefully, they told a lie. Rebecca's photographs no longer felt harmless. Still, I wanted another explanation. I wanted grief to have made me suspicious. I wanted my daughter to be clumsy with concern, not deliberate with evidence. 2 days later, she arrived carrying a green Christmas wreath in a cream-colored envelope from Evergreen Haven. I scheduled a tour, she said. Just a tour. Noah's school pageant is nearby, and we can make an afternoon of it. Evergreen Haven was not a place I had forgotten. Almost 2 decades earlier, before it had that name, the building had been a failing county care center. Residents were being transferred after inspectors found frozen pipes, missing medication logs, and a director who had hidden complaints. I had led the emergency review that protected the residents' accounts, while the county found a nonprofit buyer. I had never told Rebecca the whole story. The wreath smelled of pine. The envelope beneath it held an appointment for December 22nd. At the bottom, in Rebecca's handwriting, were 4 words: room available before Christmas. On the morning of the tour, Rebecca arrived before 8 with Grant and 2 empty suitcases. I stood in the kitchen holding a coffee cup. Snow moved sideways beyond the window, thin and dry. Why are there suitcases? Rebecca kept her gloves on. The forecast is getting worse. You can stay with us after the tour. You told me Noah's pageant was tonight. It was moved. Grant walked past me toward the stairs. We should pack enough for a few days. I put down my cup. You should both sit? Neither did. Rebecca opened the hall closet and pulled out my winter coat. Dad, please do not make this difficult. A tour does not require luggage? Her face changed then. The daughter who had brought soup disappeared, and the woman who had already made a decision stepped forward. Evergreen has a respite room open. You can try it through Christmas. If you hate it, we revisit things in January. Did I agree to that? You agreed to the tour. That is not the same thing. Grant returned carrying Margaret's old suitcase. He set it on the floor and snapped the latches open. The roads will close, he said. This is safer. I moved between him and the stairs. My knee hurt, but my voice did not shake. Put the suitcase back. He smiled in the tired, patient way people use when they want a witness to believe they are reasonable. Nobody is taking anything from you. Walter. Rebecca flinched at my first name. Grant had always called me Mr. Hale. That change mattered. People abandon courtesy when they believe authority has already shifted. I asked Rebecca to show me the respite agreement. She pulled a folder from her purse but held it against her chest. We can do paperwork there. Who completed the intake history? I did. What did you write under cognitive concerns? She looked toward Grant. I knew then that the tour was not a tour. I reached for the folder. Grant caught my wrist. He did not squeeze hard enough to leave an obvious bruise. He did not need to. The insult was in the assumption that I could be handled. Let go, I said. Rebecca whispered. Grant. He released me and raised both hands. I was keeping him from falling. I had not moved. Rebecca began to cry. The tears were real, which made the moment harder, not easier. Dad, I cannot keep waiting for a crisis. You left the stove on. When? Last Thursday. I was smearing stock. You forgot your appointment. The clinic moved it and called the wrong number. You got lost coming back from Noah's game. A bridge was closed. Grant leaned against the wall, silently letting her stack ordinary explanations into a diagnosis. Then Rebecca lifted a small red Christmas box from her bag. Inside was the brass key to my safe. For a moment, I could not breathe. I kept that key in the blue dish beside Margaret's sewing scissors. Where did you get that? You gave it to me. I did not. At Thanksgiving, you said you wanted me to have access if something happened. The lie came too smoothly. Grant watched my face instead of the key. He wanted to see whether I understood what had opened. Inside that safe were the original trust amendment, the deed, my long-term care policy, and a sealed copy of Margaret's last letter to Rebecca. There was also a small index card on which Margaret had written the names of 3 people she trusted if I ever began doubting my own judgment. Rebecca had not merely taken a key. She had crossed the final private boundary my wife and I had left between our marriage and the rest of the family. Return it. After we organized the documents, there is no we. She stepped back as if I had struck her. Grant closed the suitcase. This is the hostility the nurse warned us about. What nurse? Silence. Then Rebecca said, the mobile evaluator. No evaluator had examined me. I asked for the name. She said we were late. I asked for the report. She said the facility had it. Grant took my coat and held it open. I could have refused to leave. I could have called the sheriff from the kitchen, but my telephone was no longer on its base. The storm was strengthening, and Noah was supposedly waiting at their house. More important, I needed to know what they had already submitted in my name, so I put on the coat. Before stepping outside, I slipped Paul Dorsey's challenge coin into my pocket and turned toward the workshop window. A small green light glowed above the door. The motion camera was still recording. Grant had forgotten I installed it after tools went missing the previous spring. In the car, Rebecca placed the leather folder between herself and Grant. My phone rested in the cup holder near her knee. May I have my phone? The battery is low. Then give it to me low. Grant turned up the radio. Halfway to Evergreen, Rebecca answered a call through the car speakers. A woman asked whether the subject was calm. Rebecca fumbled to disconnect, but not before I heard the rest. The physician's statement still needs the second signature. Rebecca's hands tightened around the folder. Grant looked at me in the mirror. He knew I had heard. Evergreen Haven stood on a low hill behind bare maple trees. White lights framed the entrance, and paper stars hung behind the lobby glass. Rebecca parked beneath the covered entrance. We will come back after the storm. She said, you said this was a tour? Please do not start. Grant removed my suitcase from the trunk. He did not take the second one. That was when I understood it had been brought only to make the scene look voluntary. Inside, an admissions clerk named Melissa greeted Rebecca before she greeted me. Everything is ready. She said, nothing is ready. I answered, I have not consented to admission. Melissa's smile faded. She looked at the folder in Rebecca's hands. Grant spoke gently. He has been agitated all morning. The word was chosen for the record. I asked Melissa whether the facility had a court order, an activated power of attorney, or a physician's capacity determination. She blinked. Your daughter indicated she was your healthcare agent. Only if incapacity is certified under the instrument. Has it been certified? Rebecca said. Dad, stop interrogating her. I kept my eyes on Melissa. Has it? She asked us to wait and disappeared behind a secure door. Grant sat beside me. His knee touched mine. You know how this goes. He whispered, if you fight everyone, you prove our point. It was the first honest thing he had said all day. Rebecca stood at the Christmas tree pretending to adjust an ornament. Her shoulders trembled. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to say that fear could still be forgiven if she stopped before the next step. Then Melissa returned with the bracelet. Rebecca's departure seemed to slow. Her hand remained on the outer door. For 1 second, she turned. I raised my palm. She left anyway. The director who locked the admissions office was named Daniel Cho. He was in his early 50s, with silver beginning at his temples and a habit of reading every page before speaking. The old file was not my medical record. It showed that 18 years earlier, I had frozen the former operator's access to resident accounts. My report also required independent consent review when a family attempted placement without a court order. Daniel pointed to that policy. You wrote the safeguard that stopped your own admission. A committee wrote it. I made them keep the uncomfortable parts. He did not smile. Mr. Hale, your intake packet says your daughter holds immediate medical and financial authority. It includes a physician statement indicating progressive cognitive impairment. Which physician? He turned the page. The name was Dr. Elaine Porter. I knew Elaine. She had been Margaret's primary physician and had retired to Arizona 2 years earlier. The statement was dated the previous week, on letterhead, from a clinic that had closed. The second page was worse. It claimed I had wandered from home at night, confused Rebecca with my late wife, and threatened Grant with a wrench. None of it had happened. Then Daniel opened the financial disclosure. Rebecca had listed my house at an estimated value far below what Grant had recently told me comparable properties were bringing. She wrote that sale proceeds would fund indefinite residential care. Grant's renovation company appeared as the proposed contractor for pre-sale safety work. The nursing home was not the destination. It was the alibi. If I entered as incapacitated, they could empty the house, approve Grant's work, and describe every protest as confusion. Daniel asked whether I wanted law enforcement called. Not yet. He looked surprised. I need to know whether my daughter understands what she submitted. She signed every disclosure. Understanding and signing are not always the same. Daniel arranged a guest room without admitting me and documented that I remained voluntarily while travel was unsafe. Melissa found my phone inside Rebecca's folder. The battery was not low. It was powered off. There were 6 missed calls from my neighbor, Ruth, and 1 voicemail from Noah. Grandpa, he whispered. Mom said not to call. Uncle Grant took boxes from your safe. I think they are fighting. Please do not be mad at me. Uncle Grant. Noah had called his own father by the name Rebecca used when she wanted the boy to feel small and obedient. He was frightened. I called Ruth first. She crossed the road through the snow and looked toward my house from her porch. Grant's truck was back to the garage. 2 men were carrying file boxes from the workshop. I asked her not to confront them. I asked her to photograph the vehicles from her own property and call the sheriff if anyone forced a door. Then I called my attorney, Lydia Shaw. Lydia had drafted my estate documents and served with me on the Guardianship Review Board. I told her about the false medical statement, the stolen key. In the minute the house, she was quiet for 3 seconds. Walter, your current documents require 2 independent physicians, and written notice to me, Rebecca cannot activate them alone. She has copies from the safe. Then she also has the decoy. Years earlier, Lydia and I had placed an unsigned draft above the originals. The valid instruments remained in her office vault. Grant had underestimated a cautious old man, but Daniel found another page that made caution feel too small. It was an application for emergency temporary guardianship, prepared but not yet filed. The hearing date requested was December 24th. Rebecca and Grant planned to ask a judge for control while I was isolated in a building. They expected the courthouse to view as proof that I could no longer live independently. At the bottom, Rebecca had written that my only grandchild should not be allowed unsupervised contact with me because I was emotionally destabilizing. They were not only taking my house, they were erasing me from Noah's life. Daniel offered me an office telephone, a meal, and a chair beside the window. I accepted the meal and left the telephone untouched. Residents gathered near a piano while a volunteer played carols. They were not symbols of decline. They were people continuing. Evergreen was not the enemy. The cruelty was that Rebecca used care as camouflage for control. Lydia arrived shortly after noon in snow boots and a navy coat powdered white at the shoulders. She brought certified copies of my valid documents, a laptop, and the expression she used when facts were about to disappoint someone. The workshop camera had uploaded video before Grant disconnected the router. It showed him taking the safe key from the blue dish during his earlier visit. Rebecca stood in the doorway. She did not stop him. Later footage showed Grant and 2 employees removing the decoy folder in my emergency cash box. Taking it gave prosecutors something easier to name. Ruth's photographs confirmed the truck and license plates. Daniel preserved the intake packet and access log. The retired physician answered Lydia's call and confirmed she had not examined me or signed any statement. We had evidence. What we did not have was Rebecca's reason. Public records showed liens against Grant's projects and a supplier lawsuit. My mortgage-free property could solve his problem. Rebecca may be a victim of his pressure. I said. Lydia closed the laptop. She may be. She also signed, I know. Do you? The question landed harder because she had known my family for 20 years. I walked to the window. My knee burned from standing, but I stayed there. When Rebecca was 14, she stole money from Margaret's purse to buy a dress for a dance. Margaret wanted to confront her immediately. I asked her to wait. I told myself Rebecca would confess. She did not. When the missing money was mentioned, Rebecca blamed a girl who had visited after school. I eventually found the dress hidden in the garage. I returned it, replaced the money, and said nothing because I did not want one mistake to define my daughter. Silence did not keep the mistake from defining her. It taught her that love might clean up the evidence. My deepest fear was not losing the house. It was discovering that I had helped build the entitlement now being used against me. Daniel joined us with a sealed envelope from the archived file. He said it had been placed there by the nonprofit board's first chairwoman with instructions to give it to me if I ever returned. Inside was a photograph from the winter. The old facility nearly closed. Margaret stood beside me. On the back, she had written, Walter saved their accounts. They saved him from believing rules mattered more than people. I had forgotten she wrote that. Lydia asked what I wanted to do. The right move had to preserve her chance to tell the truth without letting her change it. We let them file. I said, notify the court that I have counsel and request an independent capacity evaluation. Preserve the admission record. Secure the house. And do not tell Rebecca what the camera caught. In the house, the sheriff can secure it. No confrontation. Daniel nodded slowly. What about your grandson? That was the part that frightened me. I called Noah's school counselor, who had known Margaret. I did not accuse his parents. I said Noah had left a distressed voicemail and asked that the school follow its child safety protocol if he arrived upset or failed to arrive. Then I called Rebecca. She answered on the 4th ring. Where are you? She demanded. In the room you chose. Her breathing changed. The director says you are refusing care. The director says I remain competent to make that choice. Grant spoke in the background. I could not make out the words. Dad, you are making everything worse. Come tomorrow. Bring Noah. Bring every page you took from my safe. We will talk with the director present. Why would I bring Noah? Because you used him as a reason to control me. He deserves to see that adults can tell the truth. She began to cry again. You have no idea what Grant has done for us? Then tell me. She hung up. An hour later, the guardianship petition was filed. It named Rebecca as guardian, Grant's company as property manager, and falsely stated that I had entered Evergreen voluntarily. She had chosen the lie in writing. The next morning, Christmas Eve, the storm eased enough for the county offices to open on a limited schedule. Rebecca did not bring Noah to Evergreen. She came with Grant, his attorney, and a private evaluator named Calvin Reese. Reese introduced himself as a geriatric care consultant. He carried no medical bag and avoided answering whether he was a licensed physician. Daniel asked to see his credentials before allowing any examination. Grant laughed. This is a family matter. We do not need a facility administrator playing detective. Daniel's expression remained calm. You are standing in my facility with a disputed admission packet. Rebecca held out the leather folder. We are taking Dad to court. I can walk. I said. Grant looked at my cane. That is not the issue. He believed the cane was evidence of a mind failing because his plan required every weakness to mean the same thing. Lydia arrived through the side entrance and waited out of sight. Two deputy sheriffs were reviewing the workshop video with Ruth's statement. Dr. Porter's affidavit had reached the court. An independent neuropsychologist had agreed to conduct a same-day screening by secure video before the hearing. None of that showed on my face. I sat across from Grant in Daniel's conference room and let him speak. The judge will see the medical letter, the photographs, and his behavior yesterday, Grant told his attorney. Once Rebecca has temporary authority, Evergreen can keep him here. We inventory the property this week. My crew starts safety remediation before New Year's. His attorney lowered her voice. Not without bids and court approval. Emergency work does not need the same process. That is not what I said. Grant glanced at me. I was looking down at the challenge coin in my palm. He mistook attention for confusion. He does not understand any of this. He said. His attorney did. She asked to speak with Rebecca alone. Grant refused. We are already late. That small refusal revealed the structure beneath their marriage. Rebecca was the proposed guardian. But Grant answered every question. Rebecca held the folder. But Grant decided which pages left it. Rebecca had signed the lies. But he treated her as another instrument. I felt compassion for her. I did not confuse compassion with innocence. Daniel placed a printed form on the table. Before Mr. Hale leaves, I need confirmation that he is departing voluntarily. Grant pushed it toward me. Signed. I read it. It did not transfer authority. It simply stated that I had received no treatment and was free to leave. I signed. Grant smiled as if he had watched an incompetent man surrender. Then he made the mistake that locked the chain. He pulled a second document from his briefcase and placed it beneath the first. And this one acknowledges Rebecca's authority for transport and property access. The pages were attached by a removable adhesive strip. He expected me to sign where the tabs pointed. I lifted the second document and read it aloud. It granted broad control over real estate, digital accounts, vehicles, and personal property. It also authorized transactions with companies owned by Rebecca's spouse. Where did this come from? Your estate plan. Grant said, No, it did not. You signed the same language years ago. Then why do you need it again? His jaw tightened. Rebecca whispered, Grant, stop. He turned on her. We are too far into this for you to panic now. The room went silent. His attorney closed her notebook. Grant realized what he had said and tried to recover. I mean, the process. We have spent weeks arranging care. Daniel had already saved the conference room security recording. A sign beside the door clearly disclosed audio and video monitoring for resident safety. Everyone had passed it on entry. Grant had not noticed. His attorney noticed now. She asked whether the meeting was being recorded. Daniel pointed to the sign. Grant stood so quickly his chair struck the wall. We are leaving. Rebecca did not move. He seized her elbow. I rose. My knee nearly failed. And I caught the table. For one humiliating second, Grant smiled. Then Rebecca pulled her arm away. It was the first choice she had made without looking at him. Where is Noah? I asked. She covered her mouth. Grant answered. With my brother. Rebecca shook her head. He took Noah's phone. She said. He said if I did not finish this, he would take Noah to Missouri and tell the court I was unstable. Grant called her a liar. She opened the leather folder and removed a printout. It was an email from Grant to his brother with directions to prepare a room and avoid answering calls from Rebecca's family until the property issue is complete. Grant had printed it by mistake with the guardianship drafts. He lunged for the page. Daniel stepped between them. The deputies entered before I had to move. They did not arrest Grant for being cruel. They separated everyone, secured the document, and informed him that the cash box and records removed from my home were part of an active theft investigation. His attorney advised him to say nothing. Rebecca began to sob. I wanted to hold her. I kept my hands at my sides. The emergency hearing would begin in 40 minutes in the county courthouse across the street. For the first time, Rebecca asked me what she should do. Tell the judge what you did. I said, then tell the judge what he did. I can open the door. You have to walk through it. The courthouse had paper snowflakes made by local school children. A deputy led us into a small hearing room. There were no cameras or cheering crowd. Public truth often happens under fluorescent lights while a clerk checks names. Judge Miriam Bell took the bench shortly before noon. She had handled probate and guardianship matters for more than a decade. I knew of her reputation, but we had never worked together. Grant sat beside a new attorney. The first had withdrawn after the recorded meeting. Rebecca sat alone at the petitioner's table until Lydia asked the court for permission to seat her separately as a potential witness. I sat beside Lydia with my cane against my chair and Paul Dorsey's coin in my pocket. Judge Bell began with the narrow question, was there probable cause to grant temporary guardianship over me before a full hearing? Grant's attorney argued that delay created danger. He presented the photographs, the intake form, and Rebecca's sworn declaration. He described my departure from Evergreen as resistance to medically recommended placement. Lydia stood. There was no medical recommendation. She introduced Dr. Porter's affidavit. It confirmed that the signature was not hers. The letterhead was obsolete, and she had not examined me. The judge compared the affidavit with the submitted statement, then asked who had provided the disputed page. Rebecca stared at her hands. Grant's attorney said his client received it through a care consultant. Calvin Reese was called into the room, under oath. Reese admitted he was not a physician. He had prepared a template assessment after a telephone interview with Grant. He said the signature page arrived later by email, and he assumed the family obtained it properly. Which family member sent it? Judge Bell asked. Reese looked at Grant. The first lie fell. Next came the admission record. Daniel testified that I had clearly refused involuntary placement, accurately explained the legal limits of my power of attorney, and completed Evergreen's cognitive screen without error. The independent neuropsychologist appeared by video and reported no evidence that I lacked decision-making capacity. Grant's attorney argued that a brief screen could not erase months of decline. Lydia displayed the original photographs with their metadata and context. The alleged nighttime wandering image had been taken at dusk while I checked a mailbox after a delivery. The dangerous medication confusion showed a weekly organizer open on refill day. The step stool photograph had been created before Rebecca replaced the bulb herself. Then the workshop video played. On the screen, Grant entered my hallway, looked toward the kitchen, and lifted the safe key from Margaret's blue dish. Rebecca watched from the doorway. My daughter made a sound I had never heard from her before. It was not surprise. It was the sound of a person watching her private compromise become a public fact. The video continued. Grant later opened the safe, removed boxes, and directed employees toward the workshop. Ruth testified by telephone that she photographed the vehicles from her property. A deputy confirmed the cash box and original papers had been recovered from Grant's locked project trailer. The second lie fell. Grant leaned toward Rebecca and whispered sharply. Judge Bell ordered him not to communicate with a witness. Lydia introduced the document Grant had tried to place beneath Evergreen's discharge acknowledgement. Daniel authenticated the disclosed security recording. The room heard Grant say, "We are too far into this for you to panic now." It was not a confession to every act. It did not need to be. Evidence works by connection, not spectacle. The false medical statement showed fabrication. The intake packet showed the intended placement. The petition showed the legal goal. The property plan showed Grant's financial benefit. The workshop footage showed unauthorized access. The hidden document showed an attempt to obtain authority after the fact. His email about Noah showed coercion against Rebecca. Each piece answered a different question. Judge Bell turned to Rebecca. Did your father voluntarily enter Evergreen Haven? Rebecca raised her head. I did not. Did you sign a declaration saying he did? Yes. Why? Grant's chair creaked. Rebecca looked at him, then at me. Because Grant said the bank would take our house if we could not cover his business debts. He said Dad's property would eventually be mine anyway. He said a temporary placement would give us time to sell equipment and start repairs. When Dad refused access, Grant told me it proved he was paranoid. Did you believe your father lacked capacity? Her answer took a long time. I did not. I believed he would forgive me. That sentence hurt more than the theft. She continued without being prompted. She admitted taking photographs, signing the intake disclosures, and repeating claims Grant had written. She admitted using Noah to frighten me about losing contact. She said Grant had threatened to leave with the boy after she hesitated. Judge Bell asked what she wanted the court to do with her petition. Rebecca removed the wedding ring from her finger. She placed it beside the folder. I withdraw it. I waive any request to control my father's affairs. I want the court to preserve everything for the investigation, including what I signed, and I want help getting my son back safely. That was the irreversible choice. I had not rescued her from consequences. I had given her a room in which truth was still possible, and she had finally chosen it. Grant stood and accused her of conspiring with me. He said I had manipulated the proceeding because I used to be some county bureaucrat. Judge Bell looked toward Lydia. Used to be. Lydia asked permission to introduce the institutional history file, not as proof of Grant's misconduct, but to explain why Evergreen's independent review policy had been triggered. Danielle read the relevant passage. 18 years earlier, I had led the emergency guardianship review that protected 37 residents from fraudulent transfers at the former county care center. My final report created the consent safeguard that required Daniel to pause my admission. The nonprofit board had later named its resident advocacy fund for Margaret and me, though I had asked them not to use our names in public materials while she was alive. Daniel unfolded the archived photograph. Margaret and I stood among residents holding winter blankets. Mr. Hale did not own Evergreen. He told the court. He did something more relevant. He helped ensure that no family could use this building to strip a competent person of choice. That was the second reveal. Not wealth. Not a secret badge. A rule written for strangers had returned to protect the man who helped write it. Judge Bell denied the guardianship petition and entered an order preserving all disputed records. She referred the false physician statement and sworn declaration for investigation. She ordered that no one other than me or Lydia could act concerning my property. She also authorized law enforcement to coordinate Noah's safe return based on Rebecca's testimony in the email, while making clear that custody questions would require a separate proceeding. Grant was not sentenced in that room. Real courts do not compress every consequence into one afternoon. The deputies arrested him outside on the existing theft complaint after confirming the recovered property and video evidence. Additional decisions would belong to prosecutors and later hearings. Before he left, Grant looked at me. You destroyed your daughter's family. I did not answer. Rebecca did. That is not true. She said, you taught me to help destroy it. I finally stopped. The clerk gathered the exhibits as church bells marked noon. Rebecca remained at the table, ringless, waiting to learn whether Noah was safe. I sat 3 feet away. I did not move closer. Noah was found that afternoon at Grant's brother's house, outside the county. He was frightened but unharmed. The brother said Grant had described the visit as an ordinary Christmas day. When deputies showed him the email and explained that Rebecca had not consented, he cooperated. Rebecca spent Christmas Eve answering questions. I spent it at Evergreen because the roads closed again. Daniel offered me the guest room. This time, I chose it. At dinner, the man in the bow tie recognized Paul Dorsey's challenge coin. Paul had once shared a room with his brother. At 7, Noah called. Can I come see you? When the roads are safe. Are you mad at Mom? I looked at the paper star taped to my window. What she did hurt me. Being hurt is not the same as stopping love. Will you forgive her? Forgiveness and trust are different jobs. He was quiet. Can I still call on Sundays? Every Sunday. Rebecca came to the telephone after him. She did not apologize immediately. For once, she did not try to purchase relief with the first available words. I told the investigator everything, she said. Even the parts Grant did not ask me to do. Good. I do not expect you to believe me. Good. She began to cry. Softly this time. What happens now? You get counsel. You cooperate. You protect Noah without turning him into your witness. And you stop asking me to remove the consequences before they teach you anything? She said she understood. No. I told her, you heard me. Understanding will take longer. Months later, Grant pleaded guilty to theft, attempted financial exploitation, and submitting a fraudulent medical document. He paid restitution, lost the right to manage vulnerable adults' property, and faced supervised release after a custodial sentence. Rebecca was not treated as if marriage erased her choices. She entered a plea on a reduced false statement charge, cooperated with prosecutors, completed community service, and underwent financial abuse counseling. The family court granted her temporary primary care of Noah with strict conditions while Grant's contact was supervised. Justice did not repair what broke. It named responsibility and limited further harm. I returned home 2 days after Christmas. The blue dish sat empty beside Margaret's scissors, and the safe door hung open. Margaret's sealed letter to Rebecca was missing. For weeks, I believe Grant had destroyed it. Then Rebecca brought it to Lydia's office. She had taken it before the hearing and hidden it in her purse. She said she was afraid the letter contained a judgment she could not bear to read. Did you open it? I asked. I did not. The envelope remained sealed. Margaret had written it during her final month. It was a mother telling her daughter that love without truth becomes permission. Rebecca placed the letter on the table between us. I think you should keep it. It was written to you. I do not deserve it. That is not your decision. She looked confused. Your mother did not write it as a prize for good behavior. Read it when you are ready to stop using shame as another hiding place. She took the envelope back. That was the first time I saw remorse in her that was not centered on what she might lose. I moved the property into a trust managed by an independent fiduciary. Noah became a future beneficiary. Rebecca could not control distributions and remained eligible for a limited share only after counseling. Restitution. And years of stability, I replaced every lock and closed old digital access. The brass safe key stayed with me. With a backup in Lydia's vault, Rebecca was not allowed inside the house without an arranged visit for 6 months. Love is not measured by how quickly the injured person makes everyone else comfortable. Rebecca wrote each week. Her 5th letter did not ask for forgiveness. It admitted that calling my caution dementia made control feel like caregiving. I answered that letter with 3 sentences. I believe you are beginning to tell yourself the truth. Keep going. Noah may visit Sunday with the counselor's approval. Our first supervised visit was awkward. Noah ran to the workshop, then stopped, because he remembered he had been told not to leave the room. I opened the door. You are still allowed to be my grandson. We repaired a small sled. Rebecca did not wander through the house or ask about the trust. When my knees stiffened, she reached for my cane, then paused. Would you like it? The question was small. It was also new. Yes, I said. She handed it to me. By spring, I added a handrail and converted the study into a bedroom. I chose the plans and paid the contractor. Ruth kept an emergency key. I began volunteering at Evergreen's resident advocacy desk. The advocacy fund was renamed for Margaret. At the ceremony, Daniel displayed the old photograph. Rebecca sat in the back. Afterward, she approached the photograph. Mom looks happy, she said. She was cold. Rebecca almost smiled. Then she handed me the open letter. I read it. I did not ask what it had done to her. That belonged to her. I do not expect your trust yet, she said. I want to know whether I can keep doing the work. You do not need my permission to become honest. Can I keep coming on Sundays? I looked at the photograph of Margaret, at the residence behind her, and at the daughter who had once believed I would forgive anything before she had to change. With notice, I said, and with Noah free to love both of us without carrying messages. She nodded. The door opened. But not all the way. 1 year later, Rebecca asked before coming for Christmas. We agreed on an afternoon meal. No overnight stay, money discussion, or photographs of my medicine, stairs, or keys. She arrived carrying the same green wreath. For a moment, I saw the first envelope beneath it and felt the old bracelet tighten around my wrist. Then Rebecca held the wreath out rather than entering. "Where would you like it?" I chose the front door. Noah helped me hang it. Rebecca waited on the porch until I stepped aside. Inside, Margaret's blue dish held the brass key again. Not because I had forgotten what happened, but because hiding every precious thing would have allowed Grant's choices and Rebecca's choices to govern the rest of my life. The director read my file and stopped an unlawful admission. The court read the evidence and stopped a fraudulent guardianship. But the most important record was the one none of them could write for me, the boundary between loving my daughter and surrendering myself. I still loved her. I no longer rescued her from the truth. Some doors can reopen. But trust should never walk through without proof. If family has ever forced you to choose between peace and dignity, tell me what boundary you set. Subscribe for more stories about quiet people who let truth, not revenge, have the final word.